The warning came on a Tuesday. Commander Sarah Chun stood in the observation deck of the International Space Station, watching Earth rotate slowly beneath her. The blue marble had never looked more beautiful, more fragile. Her coffee floated forgotten beside her as she stared at the holographic display that had just materialized in front of her. The message was simple, brutal, and impossible to ignore. Attention, primitive species. Your world has been selected for resource extraction. Evacuation is not permitted. Resistance is futile. The Krell Dominion claims this system. You have 7 planetary rotations to prepare. Sarah's hands trembled as she read the message for the 3rd time. 7 days. They had 7 days before an alien armada arrived to strip Earth of everything valuable and presumably eliminate humanity in the process. Down below, in the bunker beneath Geneva, the Emergency Council was already convening. World leaders, military commanders, and scientists gathered in a room that had been built for nuclear war scenarios, never imagining they would face something far worse. The holographic displays showed the same message in every language, broadcast across every frequency, impossible to ignore or deny. General Marcus Webb slammed his fist on the table. We need options. Someone tell me we have options. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the head of the Global Defense Initiative, pulled up a star chart. Our long-range sensors picked up the fleet approximately 4 hours ago. They're still 6 days out, moving at speeds we can't match. The fleet composition is... She paused, her face pale, extensive. We're counting at least 300 capital ships, each one roughly the size of Manhattan. Support craft number in the thousands. The room fell silent. 300 ships. The combined military might of every nation on Earth would be like throwing stones at a battleship. President Maria Gonzalez of the United American States spoke quietly. What about the Mars colony? Can we evacuate anyone there? The Krell message was clear, replied Premier Chun Wei of the Asian Coalition. No evacuation. They probably have ships positioned to intercept any escape attempts. Mars colony has 2,000 people. Earth has 8 billion. So we fight, said General Webb. We make them pay for every inch. With what? Dr. Tanaka's voice cracked slightly. Our most advanced warships were designed to fight each other, not an interstellar empire. Our weapons are chemical rockets and nuclear missiles. There's our... She gestured helplessly at the technical readout. We don't even have words for half of what we're seeing. Sarah Chun watched the meeting via secure feed from the ISS. She had volunteered to stay in orbit to serve as an observer and relay station. Someone needed to see the enemy coming, to give Earth whatever warning they could. It seemed pointless now, but she couldn't bring herself to abandon her post. Her co-pilot, Lieutenant James Morrison, drifted over with a squeeze bottle of water. You should rest, Commander. We're going to need you sharp when they arrive. Sharp for what? Sarah asked bitterly. To watch them destroy everything we've ever known? To witness the end of human civilization? James was quiet for a moment. My daughter is 8 years old. She's in Sydney with her mother. I keep thinking about what to say to her, how to explain that her dad couldn't protect her from the monsters. Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes, the droplets clinging to her eyelashes in the zero gravity. I'm sorry, James. Don't be. Just promise me something. He met her eyes, his expression fierce. Promise me we won't go quietly. Promise me that when those bastards arrive, they'll know they picked a fight with humanity. Below them, Earth continued its rotation, oblivious to the panic spreading across its surface. In New York, people crowded the streets, some praying, some rioting, many simply holding their loved ones close. In Tokyo, the temples overflowed with people seeking comfort in ancient traditions. In Rio, Moscow, Cairo, and 1,000 other cities, humanity faced its mortality. But something else was happening too. In laboratories across the world, scientists worked around the clock, sharing data freely for the first time in history. Physicists in Geneva collaborated with engineers in Mumbai. Weapons designers in Beijing compared notes with researchers in Tel Aviv. Every petty rivalry, Every national secret, every corporate patent suddenly seemed absurdly insignificant. Dr. Robert Chun, no relation to the commander, had barely slept since the message arrived. He stood in his laboratory at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, staring at equations that covered 3 whiteboards. His team had been working on theoretical quantum manipulation for years, but the funding had always been limited, the applications unclear. Now, with Earth's destruction imminent, the theoretical suddenly became desperately practical. Robert, you need to see this. His colleague, Dr. Amara Okonkwo, pulled up a simulation on the main screen. If we combine your quantum field theory with the plasma containment research from the European Space Agency and add the particle acceleration data from the Chinese team, we might have something. Robert stared at the numbers. Amara, this is insane. The energy requirements alone would drain every power plant on Earth. For a sustained burst, yes. But what if we only needed a fraction of a second? What if we could create a localized quantum disruption field that would destabilize their ship's structural integrity? Robert felt his heart racing. You're talking about turning their own momentum against them. If we could trigger a cascade at the quantum level while they're moving at relativistic speeds, they'd tear themselves apart, Amara finished. But we need to get the device close enough to their lead ships. And we need to test it. We don't have time for proper testing. I know. Amara's expression was grim. So we build it, aim it, and pray. The news spread through the scientific community like wildfire. Within hours, the design was being refined by thousands of brilliant minds working in concert. Manufacturing facilities that usually produce consumer electronics were retooled to create components for weapons that existed only in theory. In orbit, Sarah Chun received an encrypted message from Dr. Tanaka. Commander, we're going to need the ISS. We're repurposing it as a weapons platform. Sarah read the message twice. A weapons platform? Doctor, with respect, the ISS wasn't designed for combat. We have no weapons, no shields, no. We're sending up the components now. You and Lieutenant Morrison will oversee the assembly. We're calling it Project Defiance. Over the next 3 days, a steady stream of supply rockets arrived at the ISS. Sarah and James worked in shifts, barely sleeping, assembling a device that looked more like abstract art than a weapon. Quantum field generators wrapped around the station's main truss. Particle accelerators ran the length of the solar panel arrays. Power cells rushed through production and, untested, were stacked in what used to be the Japanese laboratory module. This is either brilliant or suicidal, James muttered as he tightened the last connection on a field generator. Possibly both. The eggheads say it'll work, Sarah replied, though her voice lacked conviction. The eggheads also said we had 30 years before we needed to worry about alien contact. On Earth, military forces prepared in the only way they knew how. Every nuclear submarine was positioned strategically around the globe. Air forces flew continuous patrols. Ground-based missiles were armed and aimed at the sky. Everyone knew it was futile, but the alternative was waiting to die without raising a fist. General Webb stood in the command center, watching the countdown clock. 4 days had passed since the warning. 3 days remained. Status report, he barked. All conventional forces are at maximum readiness, replied his aide. Nuclear arsenal is armed and awaiting authorization. The quantum weapon on the ISS is operational, though Dr. Tanaka stresses it's completely untested. Anything else? The aide hesitated. Sir, there are reports coming in from civilian groups. They're organizing resistance cells, building improvised weapons, preparing for ground combat if the Krell land forces. Webb felt a surge of pride despite the hopelessness of their situation. Make sure they have whatever support we can provide. If humanity's going down, we're going down fighting. In the Australian outback, former Army Ranger Jack Sullivan gathered his neighbors around a fire. They were farmers, teachers, mechanics, ordinary people who had never expected to become soldiers. But when faced with extinction, ordinary people found extraordinary courage. They're expecting us to roll over, Jack said, checking the rifle he'd kept from his service days. They're expecting primitive natives who will panic and scatter. They don't know who they're messing with. "What can we possibly do against our ships?" asked Maria, a schoolteacher who'd learned to shoot that week. "We do what humans have always done. We adapt. We survive. We make them regret ever pointing their fleet at our world." Similar scenes played out across the planet. In the favelas of Sao Paulo, gangs that had fought each other for decades united under a common cause. In the mountains of Afghanistan, warriors who had never surrendered to anyone prepared to add alien invaders to their list of defeated enemies. In the fishing villages of Japan, elderly men who remembered a different war taught their grandchildren about resilience. Humanity, for all its flaws and divisions, was showing its true nature, not as conquerors or builders or dreamers, but as survivors, as fighters, as a species that had clawed its way to the top of Earth's food chain, not through strength or speed, but through sheer stubborn refusal to give up. On the ISS, Sarah floated in the observation deck, watching Earth below. The night side was lit up more brightly than usual. Cities blazed with light, people unwilling to spend their final days in darkness. She could see the lights of ships at sea, aircraft in the sky, fires in 1,000 places where people gathered. "Beautiful, isn't it?" James joined her, exhausted from their work. "Terrifying," Sarah corrected. "All those people, all those lives. And we're supposed to save them with an experimental weapon that might just blow up the station. Better than doing nothing." Sarah's communicator chirped. Dr. Tanaka's voice came through, tense and urgent. "Commander Chun, our deep space sensors are showing something unusual. The Krell fleet has split into 2 groups. The main force is still on course for Earth, but a smaller group, maybe 30 ships, has broken off and is accelerating." "Accelerating where?" "Toward Mars." "Commander, they're going to hit the colony first." Sarah felt ice in her veins. 2,000 people on Mars. 2,000 humans who were about to face the full might of an alien warship group with nothing but a few habitat domes and mining equipment. How long do they have? 18 hours. Maybe less. Sarah closed her eyes. They had focused everything on defending Earth, on the quantum weapon, on preparation. Mars was an afterthought, a doomed outpost that no one expected to save. But 18 hours meant the Krell would reach Mars 3 full days before Earth, which meant humanity was about to get a preview of what was coming. And if the colony survivors could send back any intelligence, any information about Krell tactics, weapons, weaknesses, "Doctor, we need to warn Mars. They need to observe everything, record everything, and transmit it all back to us." "Already done, Commander. Governor Richards on Mars is preparing their defense. They know it's hopeless, but they're going to make it count." On Mars, in the main dome of Olympus settlement, Governor Elizabeth Richards addressed her people. The colony was small, a testament to human ambition and determination. Scientists, engineers, farmers, all working together to build a new world. Now they would die together, defending it. "We all knew the risks when we came here," Elizabeth said, her voice steady despite her fear. "We knew Mars could kill us in 100 different ways. Turns out we just didn't imagine this one." A few nervous laughs rippled through the crowd. "But here's what those Krell bastards don't know," she continued, her voice growing harder. "They don't know that humans crossed 100 million kilometers of space to live on a frozen rock, because we refuse to accept limits. They don't know that we've survived solar storms, equipment failures, and supplies running low. They don't know that every single person in this room chose to leave Earth, chose to risk everything, because we believe in something bigger than ourselves." She looked around at the faces, scared but determined. "So here's what we're going to do. We're going to show them what humans are made of. We're going to record everything. Every weapon they use, every tactic they employ, every weakness we can spot. And we're going to transmit it all back to Earth in real time. Our deaths are going to buy our home world the intelligence they need to fight back. And if we can take a few of those ships with us," added Chief Engineer Marcus Torres, hefting a mining laser that had been weaponized, "that's just a bonus." The colony mobilized with practiced efficiency. Every camera was positioned to observe the sky. Every communication system was set to broadcast continuously. The mining equipment, powerful enough to cut through rock, was mounted on rovers and aimed skyward. They had 18 hours to turn a colony into a fortress. It wasn't enough time. It would never be enough time. But it was what they had, and they would use every second of it. Back on Earth, the world watched and waited. The countdown clock ticked down, each second bringing them closer to the unknown. People made peace with loved ones. Soldiers checked their weapons one more time. Scientists ran final calculations on weapons that might save them or might kill them just as surely as the Krell. And somewhere in the dark between Mars and Earth, 30 alien warships raced toward their first target, confident in their superiority, certain of their victory. They were about to learn their first lesson about humanity. Humans didn't need to be the strongest or the fastest or the most advanced. The first Krell ship entered Mars orbit exactly 17 hours and 42 minutes after the warning. Governor Richards watched it appear on the horizon through the dome's reinforced windows, a massive wedge of dark metal that blotted out the stars. Recording started. Marcus confirmed, his hands steady on the controls despite the sweat on his forehead. Everything we see is being transmitted to Earth in real time. The ship was enormous, easily 5 kilometers from bow to stern. Its surface was covered in what looked like geometric patterns that seemed to shift and move in the weak Martian sunlight. As it descended through the thin atmosphere, more ships appeared behind it, spreading out in a formation that suggested centuries of military precision. "They're not even trying to hide their approach," Elizabeth muttered. "They think we're no threat at all. Maybe we can use that," Marcus suggested. He gestured to the mining equipment they had positioned around the dome. "If they get close enough, overconfident enough." The lead ship stopped its descent about 2 kilometers above the colony. For a long moment, nothing happened. The colonists held their breath, weapons ready, cameras recording every detail. Then, a voice boomed across every frequency, translated into perfect English by technology far beyond human understanding. "Primitive organisms. This settlement violates Krell territorial claims. You have 1 rotation to demonstrate your technological capacity. If deemed insufficient, immediate termination will proceed." Elizabeth grabbed the microphone, her voice hard. "This is Governor Elizabeth Richards of the Mars colony, representing the sovereign territory of humanity. We reject your claims and demand you leave our system immediately." The response was immediate and chilling. A lance of brilliant blue energy shot from the Krell ship, striking a storage facility 300 meters from a main dome. The building simply ceased to exist, vaporized so completely that there wasn't even debris. Just a smoking crater where dozens of tons of supplies had been stored moments before. "Your defiance is noted and irrelevant. Demonstrate technology or accept termination." Marcus looked at Elizabeth, who nodded grimly. They had discussed this possibility. The Krell wanted to see what humanity could do, wanted to assess the threat level before committing to total destruction. It was an opportunity, perhaps the only one they would get. "Light them up," Elizabeth ordered. The mining lasers activated simultaneously, brilliant beams of concentrated energy designed to cut through rock. They converged on the lead Krell ship's underside, where their cameras had spotted what might be a power distribution node. For 3 seconds, the lasers burned against the alien hull. Then, the ship's shields flickered into visibility, a shimmering barrier that deflected the energy harmlessly away. The lasers might as well have been flashlights. "Analysis complete," the Krell voice announced. "Technology level classified as primitive industrial. No significant defensive or offensive capabilities detected. Termination authorized." "Wait," Elizabeth shouted desperately. "We have more to show you. We have nuclear weapons, quantum research, biological warfare capabilities. We're more advanced than you think." There was a pause. The alien ships hung in the Martian sky like birds of prey considering their next move. "Interesting. Nuclear fission represents threshold technology. Demonstrate immediately or claim will be dismissed as deception." Elizabeth's mind raced. They didn't actually have nuclear weapons on Mars. The colony charter had specifically forbidden them. But if the Krell thought they did, if they could buy even a few more minutes to record and transmit data, we need time to activate the warheads, she lied. They're stored in secure facilities across the colony. Give us 1 hour. Unacceptable. You have 60 seconds. Marcus was frantically working his console, pulling up every technical schematic of the colony he could find. Elizabeth, the fuel processing plant. We're using a thorium reactor for power generation. If we overload it, create a runaway reaction, that would kill everyone in the colony instantly. We're dead anyway, but a nuclear detonation might make them cautious. Might buy Earth a few extra hours or days if they think humanity has more fight than expected. Elizabeth closed her eyes. 2,000 people had trusted her to lead them, to keep them safe. Now she was considering killing them all to send a message to an enemy that might not even care. But then she thought of Earth. 8 billion people who would face these same ships in 3 days. Every second of data they could transmit, every tactic they could reveal, might save thousands or millions of lives. Do it, she whispered. But broadcast a warning first. Let everyone make their peace. The announcement went out across the colony. Every person heard Elizabeth's voice, calm and sad, explaining what was about to happen and why. Some people sobbed. Some prayed. Some simply held hands with those nearby, finding comfort in human connection during their final moments. A young engineer named Sarah Kim managed to send one last message to her brother on Earth. Tell Mom I love her. Tell her we didn't give up. Tell her we made it count. 60 seconds passed. Time expired. No demonstration detected. Termination proceeding. No, wait, Marcus shouted. We're overloading the reactor now. Look at your sensors. You'll see the energy spike. He slammed his hand down on the emergency override, bypassing every safety system built into the thorium reactor. The reaction that had been carefully controlled for 3 years suddenly went critical. Alarms shrieked throughout the colony. The ground trembled as the reactor core temperature spiked beyond anything it was designed to handle. On the Krell ships, sensors detected the building energy signature. Energy pattern consistent with primitive fission reaction. Yield calculation in progress. The reactor exploded with the force of a small nuclear weapon. The blast vaporized the processing plant instantly and sent a shockwave racing across the Martian surface. The main dome, built to withstand the harsh Martian environment, lasted almost 2 seconds before the pressure wave shattered it like glass. Governor Elizabeth Richards died, still gripping the microphone, her last thoughts of her husband back on Earth, and her hope that this sacrifice meant something. 2,000 souls ended in an instant, their bodies scattered across the rust-red landscape of Mars, the planet they had worked so hard to tame. But their cameras had kept recording. Right up until the blast, every angle of the Krell ships had been captured and transmitted to Earth. The colonists had given humanity something precious. Information about shields, weapon systems, ship formations, response times, and perhaps most importantly, they had revealed something about Krell psychology. The aliens were curious. They had paused to evaluate human technology. They had given warnings and chances to demonstrate capability. This wasn't mindless destruction for its own sake. The Krell were methodical, analytical, following some kind of protocol, which meant they could be fooled. They could be tricked. They could be beaten. On Earth, in the Geneva Command Center, the transmission ended with a burst of static as the colony died. The room was silent except for the quiet sound of someone crying. Dr. Tanaka was the first to speak, her voice thick with grief. They gave us everything. Look at this data. Shield harmonics, weapon charging cycles, communication protocols. They died to give us a fighting chance. General Webb's face was carved from stone. Then we damn well better use it. Get every scientist we have analyzing this footage. I want to know everything about those ships, every weakness, every pattern. Those people bought this intelligence with their lives. We're not going to waste it. President Gonzalez stood, her eyes red but her voice steady. I want a memorial prepared for the Mars colony. When this is over, whether we win or lose, the world needs to remember what they did. When this is over, Premier Chun said quietly, if we survive, Mars will be the first place we rebuild. Those people claimed a new world for humanity. We'll honor that. Across Earth, people watched the footage of Mars colony's final moments. They saw ordinary people face impossible odds with courage. They saw Governor Richards standing defiant even as death approached. They saw the sacrifice made so that humanity might live. And something changed in the collective consciousness of the species. The riots stopped. The looting ended. The panic that had gripped cities for days transformed into something harder, fiercer. If 2,000 colonists could face death with such bravery, how could 8 billion people do any less? In Tokyo, engineers worked through the night implementing shield frequency disruption patterns based on what Mars had revealed. In New York, military strategists revised tactics based on Krell response times. In Mumbai, physicists refined the quantum weapon using data about how Krell shields interacted with energy attacks. Sarah Chun watched the Mars footage on repeat in the ISS, tears floating in globules around her face. She had known Elizabeth Richards, had trained with her before the Mars mission. They had joked about being pioneers, about humanity's future among the stars. Now Elizabeth was dead, along with everyone else who had dared to dream of a human future on another world. They're accelerating, James said, pulling up the latest sensor data. The main Krell fleet. They're moving faster now, cutting their arrival time by almost a day. They're angry, Sarah realized. Mars hurt them somehow. Not physically, but the fact that the colony fought back, that it took a nuclear detonation to kill them all. It made the Krell look less invincible. So they're rushing to Earth to make an example of us before we can prepare further. Sarah pulled up the quantum weapon controls. The device wrapped around the ISS hummed with barely contained energy, exotic particles held in magnetic bottles, quantum field generators ready to tear holes in space-time itself. Then, we'd better be ready to give them a surprise. Down on Earth, Jack Sullivan and his group of Australian resistance fighters watched the same footage. They saw how the Krell ships moved, how they positioned themselves, how they prioritized targets. They go for infrastructure first, Jack pointed out. Storage facilities, power plants, anything that looks like it supports the colony. They're trying to break our ability to fight back before engaging directly. So, we hide our supplies, Maria suggested. Make everything look abandoned or primitive. When they land forces, we hit them from positions they've already dismissed as irrelevant. Exactly. Jack felt hope stirring for the first time in days. They're advanced, but they're also predictable. They follow patterns, protocols. That makes them vulnerable to guerrilla tactics. Similar realizations were happening in resistance cells around the globe. The Krell weren't unstoppable gods. They were a military force, powerful, but following rules, operating within parameters. And every military force in history, no matter how powerful, had weaknesses. The question was whether humanity could exploit those weaknesses before being wiped out. Dr. Robert Chin stared at his quantum weapon equations with new understanding. The Mars data showed exactly how Krell shields worked, the frequency patterns they used, the energy distribution across their hull. He could see now that his original design would have been partially effective at best. But with this new information, with the data purchased with 2,000 lives, he could make it perfect. Amara, look at this, he said excitedly, despite the grim circumstances. Their shields operate on a rotation basis. They're incredibly strong, but only in the direction they're focused. If we could hit them with simultaneous attacks from multiple angles. The shields can't protect everything at once, Amara finished. They'd have to choose what to defend. And while they're rotating shields, there are microsecond gaps in coverage. Our quantum disruptor could slip through during those gaps and tear their ships apart from the inside. We need perfect timing. We need Mars colony's sacrifice to mean something, Robert corrected. We've got the data. We've got the weapon. Now we just need the courage to use it. Amara smiled grimly. Courage is one thing humanity has never lacked. The Krell fleet was now 2 days out from Earth. Their formation was tight, efficient, designed to maximize firepower while minimizing vulnerability. 300 ships moving in perfect coordination, supported by thousands of smaller craft. On the lead vessel, Commander Zaktal reviewed the Mars colony footage with what humans might have recognized as frustration. The primitive species had shown unexpected resistance. The nuclear detonation had been crude, but effective, destroying evidence and denying the Krell intelligence about human defensive capabilities. Analysis of the fission weapon. Zaktal demandив. Primitive, but within expected parameters for industrial species, his science officer reported. Yield was approximately 8 kilotons, insufficient to threaten fleet vessels even without shields. And yet they chose death over submission. Irrational behavior, Commander. The colonists could have negotiated for additional time, could have preserved their existence by cooperating with Dominion protocols. Zaktal considered this. In his 3 centuries of service to the Krell Dominion, he had conquered 17 star systems. He had faced species of every type: aggressive warriors, peaceful traders, hive minds, and solitary geniuses. All had eventually submitted to Krell superiority. But the species, these humans, seemed fundamentally different. They fought when fighting was pointless. They sacrificed themselves for information that might help others. They showed patterns that were tactically foolish, but strategically concerning. Increase surveillance of the primary planet, Zaktal ordered. I want real-time monitoring of every power signature, every vehicle movement, every energy spike. If they have more nuclear weapons, I want to know about them before we enter engagement range. Yes, Commander. Though preliminary scans suggest their nuclear arsenal is limited to primitive missile delivery systems. No orbital platforms detected, no advanced energy weapons, no quantum shields. The Mars colonists died for a reason, Zaktal said quietly. They were transmitting data until the moment of termination. These humans are learning, adapting. We must assume they will apply whatever intelligence they gather to their defense. Surely no amount of intelligence can compensate for the technological gap, Commander. Zaktal looked at the tactical display showing Earth, a blue world teeming with 8 billion individuals of this stubborn, irrational, fascinating species. Let us hope you are correct, he said. For if these humans prove as resourceful as they are stubborn, this may be a longer conquest than anticipated. Back on Earth, humanity counted down its final hours. The Krell fleet would arrive in 48 hours. Every weapon was ready. Every soldier at their post, every scientist had done everything possible to prepare. But, more importantly, every human being on the planet now knew what they were fighting for. They had seen what happened to those who stood against the Krell. They had watched Mars' colony die with dignity and purpose. Now it was Earth's turn. And, unlike Mars, Earth had 8 billion people ready to fight. The Krell were about to discover why humanity had survived ice ages, supervolcanoes, plagues, and countless wars. They were about to learn why, despite every disadvantage, humans had climbed to dominance on their world. Because humanity's greatest weapon wasn't technology or strength. The Krell fleet entered Earth's detection range with 24 hours to spare. Every sensor on the planet locked onto them, tracking their approach with desperate precision. The formation was unchanged from what Mars had observed, that same geometric pattern that spoke of absolute confidence in their superiority. In the Geneva Command Center, General Webb stood before a holographic display that showed the approaching armada. Each ship was a red dot on the screen, and there were so many red dots that Earth appeared surrounded by a cloud of blood. Final status report, he ordered, his voice steady despite the fear in his gut. All conventional forces are deployed, his aide reported. Nuclear submarines are in position around the globe. Air forces are ready for immediate scramble. Ground forces are entrenched at strategic locations. The civilian resistance has been armed and briefed as much as possible. Unconventional weapons? Dr. Tanaka stepped forward. The quantum disruptor on the ISS is fully operational. We've programmed it with the shield frequency data from Mars. If Commander Chun can get within range and time the firing correctly, It should cause cascade failures in their lead ships. And if it doesn't work, then the station is vaporized along with everyone on it, and we have no plan B. The optimism is overwhelming, Webb muttered. He turned to President Gonzalez. Madam President, this is your final chance to order a surrender. Maybe we can negotiate terms, save some lives. Gonzalez shook her head. Mars tried reasoning with them. 2,000 people bought us the knowledge that the Krell don't negotiate with species they consider primitive. We fight or we die. At least if we fight, we die on our feet. Then, may God have mercy on us all. On the ISS, Sarah Chun performed one last systems check on the quantum weapon. The mathematics behind it were so complex that even the scientists who designed it weren't entirely sure it would work. They were essentially trying to punch a hole through reality itself, creating a localized quantum disruption that would cause the Krell ship's own shields to tear them apart. You know, this is a suicide mission, James said quietly. I know, Sarah replied. Once we fire this thing, the energy signature will light us up like a beacon. Every Krell ship will know exactly where we are. They'll probably vaporize us before we can even see if it worked. Probably. James floated closer, taking her hand. I'm glad I'm here with you. If the world's going to end, at least I'm ending it doing something that matters. Sarah squeezed his hand. Your daughter will be proud of you. I hope so. His voice cracked slightly. I hope somewhere, somehow, she'll know her dad didn't give up. None of us gave up. Below them, Earth continued its endless rotation, but the planet had transformed in the past week. The lights that usually marked cities were different now. Some areas had gone dark, evacuated or sheltering underground. Others blazed brighter than ever, people refusing to hide in their final hours. In Beijing, Premier Chen stood on a balcony overlooking the city. Millions of people moved through the streets below, some panicking, most simply going about their business with grim determination. If these were humanity's final days, they would face them with dignity. His phone rang. It was his daughter, safe in a shelter beneath the Himalayas. Father, the news is saying the Krell will be here in hours. That's correct, little Lotus. Will the weapons work? Will we win? Chun considered lying, offering false hope. But his daughter deserved truth. I don't know. We're going to fight with everything we have. That's all anyone can do. I am scared. So am I, daughter. So am I. But remember what your grandmother used to say? The bamboo bends but does not break. Humanity has survived every challenge our world threw at us. We will survive this too, or we will make our ending so spectacular that the universe remembers us forever. There was a pause. Then his daughter said, I love you, Father. I love you too. Now get back to the shelter. And remember, no matter what happens, you come from a long line of survivors. That strength is in your blood. In Washington, D.C., President Gonzalez recorded a message to be broadcast when the battle began. She sat in the Oval Office, the weight of 8 billion lives pressing down on her shoulders. My fellow humans, she began, in every generation, there comes a moment that defines us. Today is our moment. An alien force has come to our world with the intention of destroying us, of taking everything we've built, everything we are. They expect us to surrender without a fight. They expect us to accept our extinction quietly. She paused, gathering her thoughts. They don't know us very well, do they? Humanity has faced extinction before. Ice ages that should have killed us. Plagues that should have wiped us out. Wars that should have ended our species. Each time, we found a way to survive. Each time, we emerged stronger. Today, we face our greatest challenge. But we also show our greatest strength. Every nation, every culture, every person on this planet has united with a single purpose: to survive, to fight, to show the universe that humanity will not go gently into that good night. In the hours ahead, many of us will die. Perhaps all of us. But we will die fighting. We will die making them pay for every inch of our world. And if we must fall, we will fall in such a way that the stars themselves will remember what happened when someone tried to destroy humanity. Be brave, be strong, and know that whether we live or die today, we have already proven something incredible. that when faced with extinction, the human race stands together. In orbit, the first Krell ships began braking maneuvers. They were close enough now that telescopes could make out details on their hulls. The geometric patterns that covered them pulsed with light, some kind of energy distribution system far beyond human understanding. Commander Zaktal studied the scans of Earth with growing confusion. The planet should have been in chaos. Panicking populations, desperate evacuation attempts, governments collapsing as people realized the futility of resistance. Instead, Earth was mobilizing. Energy signatures from thousands of military installations. Vehicle movements suggesting coordinated deployment of forces. Communication networks operating at maximum capacity, coordinating rather than breaking down. They're preparing to fight, his tactical officer observed unnecessarily. Against 300 capital ships and support craft numbering in the thousands, Zaktal said. It's suicide. Commander, we're detecting unusual energy signatures from their orbital station. The patterns don't match any known weapon system in our database. Zaktal pulled up the readings. The human space station was small, primitive, clearly not designed for combat. But something had been added to it, something generating quantum fluctuations that his sensors couldn't quite classify. Interesting. They've weaponized their observation platform. Should we destroy it before entering weapon range? Zaktal considered. The energy readings suggested some kind of experimental weapon, but the power levels were far too low to threaten even a single Krell vessel, let alone the fleet. Destroying it now would be a waste of ammunition and might alert the humans that their surprise had been detected. Better to let them try their desperate gambit. Better to let them see their best weapon fail before beginning the systematic destruction of their world. Negative. We'll neutralize it during the first wave. Focus shields forward, standard invasion formation. Let's show these humans what happens when primitive species challenge the Dominion. The fleet continued its approach, now less than 1 hour from Earth orbit. On the planet below, final preparations reached their conclusion. Every soldier checked their weapon one last time. Every pilot climbed into their cockpit. Every parent held their child close. General Webb stood in the command center, surrounded by leaders from every nation on Earth. For the first time in human history, there were no political divisions in this room. No arguments about territory or resources or ideology. Just a single species preparing to defend its home. The Krell will probably target military installations first, he said, pointing to the tactical display. They'll want to eliminate our ability to coordinate resistance. That means Geneva, Washington, Beijing, Moscow. All the major command centers will be under fire within minutes of their arrival. Then, we make sure the command structure can't be decapitated, President Gonzalez replied. Distribute authority to regional commanders immediately. If we die, the fight continues. Already done, Madam President. Premier Chin spoke up. What about the civilian populations? Surely the Krell won't target them directly? Mars suggests otherwise, Dr. Tanaka said grimly. They vaporized a storage facility just to demonstrate their power. I think we have to assume everything is a target. Then, the shelters better hold, said General Webb, because millions of people are counting on them. On the ISS, Sarah Chan watched through the observation window as the Krell fleet grew from distant dots to visible shapes. The lead ships were now close enough that she could make out details even without magnification. They were beautiful in a terrifying way, elegant weapons honed by centuries of conquest. 30 minutes to weapon range, James reported. Quantum Disruptor is charged and ready. We got one shot at this, Sarah. Then we'd better make it count. Sarah pulled up the targeting systems. Mars data had shown that the Krell formation put their command ship in the center, protected by escorts. That ship would have the strongest shields, the best weapons, the most experienced crew. It was also the most important target. We're going for the flagship, Sarah decided. If we could take out their commander, maybe the fleet will lose coordination. Or maybe they'll get angry and vaporize Earth faster. Then, I guess we'll find out. Sarah entered the targeting coordinates. James, in case this doesn't work, I want you to know serving with you has been an honor." "The honor was mine, Commander." They watched the countdown timer. 20 minutes. 15. 10. On Earth, President Gonzalez's message began broadcasting on every channel. People stopped what they were doing to listen, to hear their leader speak what might be humanity's final words. In New York, families gathered around screens in their underground shelters. In Tokyo, soldiers stood at attention, listening to the message translated into Japanese. In Mumbai, Rio, Cairo, and 1,000 other cities, people heard the same call to courage. 5 minutes. The Krell fleet began final approach maneuvers. The ships spread out, surrounding Earth in a formation that would allow them to strike every continent simultaneously. Weapon ports opened like hungry mouths. Shield generators hummed with power. Commander Zaktal felt satisfaction as he watched the deployment. Everything was proceeding perfectly. In minutes, this primitive world would learn the cost of defiance. "All ships report ready, Commander." "Excellent. Begin with surgical strikes on military installations. I want their command structure eliminated in the first wave. Then, we can proceed with systematic pacification. And the orbital station? Ignore it for now. It can't hurt us." 3 minutes. Sarah Chen's hands were steady on the controls despite her racing heart. The targeting computer showed the Krell flagship in perfect position. "One shot. One chance. Please work," she whispered to the exotic weapon that surrounded her station. "Please let Mars Colony's sacrifice mean something." 2 minutes. Across Earth, people held their breath. Soldiers tightened their grips on weapons. Scientists prayed to gods they weren't sure they believed in. Parents pulled their children closer. 1 minute. The Krell flagship entered weapon range. Its forward batteries began charging, building energy for the devastating first strike that would shatter human military coordination. 30 seconds. Sarah watched the timer count down. Her finger hovered over the firing control. Everything depended on this moment. Everything. 10 seconds. James was praying quietly in Russian, words his grandmother had taught him. 5 seconds. The quantum weapon reached full charge. 3 seconds. Sarah closed her eyes, thinking of Earth, of humanity, of everything they stood to lose. 2 seconds. "For Mars Colony," she whispered. 1 second. She pressed the button. The weapon didn't look like much when it fired. There was no brilliant beam of light, no explosive release of energy visible to the naked eye. Instead, reality itself seemed to fold around the ISS for a fraction of a second, space contracting and expanding simultaneously in a way that made observers feel momentarily nauseous. Then, a pulse of exotic particles, existing in states that shouldn't have been possible according to conventional physics, raced toward the Krell flagship at a significant fraction of light speed. Commander Zaktal saw the energy signature on his displays and dismissed it. The power reading was absurdly low, barely enough to scratch their shields. Whatever experimental weapon the humans had cobbled together, it was clearly insufficient. "Commander, the energy pattern is unusual. I recommend evasive action." "Unnecessary. Their weapon can't possibly penetrate our shields. Continue with firing sequence." The quantum pulse struck the flagship's forward shield array exactly 3 seconds after Sarah fired. For a moment, nothing happened. The shields absorbed the impact as designed, energy dissipating across their surface. Then, the Mars Colony data proved its worth. The pulse had been timed to arrive during one of those microsecond gaps when the Krell shields rotated coverage. The exotic particles slipped through the gap and impacted the hull directly, their quantum properties interacting with the ship's structural field generators in ways the Krell had never anticipated. Because the Krell had never faced a weapon that attacked on the quantum level. The particles didn't explode or burn. Instead, they caused something far more insidious. They made reality disagree with itself about whether the flagship's hull existed in its current state. At the quantum level, matter exists in probability clouds. An atom might be here or there, in this state or that, until observation collapses the probability into certainty. The quantum disruptor forced those probabilities to refuse to collapse, creating a cascade of quantum uncertainty that spread through the flagship structure like a virus. For the crew of the flagship, the experience was nightmarish. Bulkheads that had been solid one moment became transparent the next. Control consoles existed and didn't exist simultaneously. The very floor beneath their feet flickered in and out of reality. Commander Zaktal watched his hands become translucent, saw through them to the command console beyond, then watched them return to solidity. His mind, evolved to understand reality in concrete terms, struggled to process what was happening. All stations report structural integrity. His communications officer tried to speak, but his voice flickered in and out like a failing hologram. The flagship's structural field generators, designed to hold the massive ship together against the stress of faster-than-light travel, fought desperately to restore quantum coherence. But the cascade had taken hold. Every atom in the ship was vibrating between possible states, and the more the generators tried to force coherence, the more violent the oscillations became. Then, one of the shield generators, its existence too uncertain to maintain power, failed completely. Without the shield, the ship's momentum at relativistic speeds became its enemy. Air molecules, hitting the unshielded hull at a significant fraction of light speed, struck with the force of bullets. The quantum uncertainty that had been contained by the shields suddenly had free rein across the entire structure. The flagship didn't explode. That would have been too clean. Instead, it unraveled. Sections of the ship phased out of existence entirely, their quantum states collapsing into universes where they had never been built. Other sections became hyperdense, atoms crushing together as probability waves collapsed into the most compact possible state. The command section, where Zaktal stood watching in horror, began spinning along an axis that existed in 4 dimensions instead of 3. To the observers watching from Earth, the flagship appeared to come apart, like a puzzle being disassembled by invisible hands. Pieces flickered between existence and non-existence. Energy vented in impossible directions. The ship that had been 5 kilometers of terrifying military power became a cloud of quantum uncertainty expanding through space. In the Geneva Command Center, alarms blared as sensors registered the flagship's destruction. "It worked," Dr. Tanaka whispered, disbelief clear in her voice. It actually worked. General Webb stared at the displays showing the Krell flagship's death. "How long until they retaliate?" "The ISS is already gone, sir." Krell escorts vaporized it 3 seconds after the flagship started breaking apart. Sarah Chun and James Morrison had time to see their weapon succeed before the Krell response turned them and the International Space Station into plasma. Their last thoughts were of satisfaction. They had struck the first blow. They had proven humanity could hurt the Krell. But the destruction of the flagship had an effect nobody on Earth anticipated. The Krell fleet, for the first time in 3 centuries of conquest, panicked. On the escort ships, commanders watched their flagship die in a way that shouldn't have been possible. The humans had penetrated Krell shields. They had used a weapon that attacked on the quantum level, something most advanced species took centuries to develop. The primitive natives, who should have been easy prey, had just demonstrated technology that rivaled Krell science. All ships, full defensive shields. The acting fleet commander ordered from the heavy cruiser dominance. "Pull back to maximum weapon range. I want analysis of that weapon immediately." "Sir, if they have one such weapon, they may have others. Recommend immediate retreat to reform outside the system." The commander, a seasoned veteran named Krell Axe, considered the suggestion. His instinct screamed to pull back, to call for reinforcements, to approach this system with far more caution. But retreat would mean admitting defeat to a primitive species. It would mean reporting to the Dominion that a simple conquest had failed. It would mean shame that would follow him for the rest of his life. Negative. We have 300 ships remaining. They have 1 planet. Increase combat spacing between vessels, and activate maximum shield rotation. Whatever weapon they used, It clearly requires enormous power and precise timing. They can't possibly have many of them. On Earth, General Webb came to the same conclusion. How many more quantum disruptors do we have? Dr. Tanaka's face fell. None, General. That was our only one. The components took every exotic particle generator on Earth running for a week to produce. We couldn't build another for months. So we just used our best weapon. And they're going to be expecting it now. Webb slammed his fist on the console. Then, we fight with what we have left. Conventional forces engage when the Krell enter range. Make them pay for every meter. The Krell fleet, now more cautious but still confident in their superiority, resumed their approach. This time, they maintained maximum spacing between ships, shields rotating at random intervals, prepared for another quantum attack. They were so focused on the threat from orbit that they missed the real danger. Under the oceans, in hardened silos, hidden in mountain ranges, and buried beneath deserts, humanity's nuclear arsenal came to life. Thousands of missiles launched simultaneously, streaking skyward on pillars of fire and fury. These weren't the primitive weapons the Krell expected. In the week since the warning, human engineers had modified warheads using the Mars data. The missiles didn't aim for the Krell ships directly. That would be pointless against shields. Instead, they were programmed to detonate in calculated patterns around the fleet, creating overlapping fields of electromagnetic pulses timed to the shield rotation cycles Mars had observed. The first wave of missiles entered the upper atmosphere, their targeting computers making final adjustments based on real-time data from surviving satellites. Nuclear warheads detonated in space, each explosion creating a massive EMP burst. The Krell shields, designed to stop physical projectiles and energy weapons, handled the electromagnetic pulse easily. But the shields had to rotate to cover all vectors, and during the microseconds of rotation, gaps appeared. That's when the second wave struck. Conventional missiles, their warheads replaced with kinetic penetrators made from depleted uranium, raced through the gaps in the shield coverage. Most were destroyed by point defense systems, but some got through. A frigate stationed over North America took 3 kinetic rounds through its engine section. The impacts didn't destroy the ship, but they damaged critical systems. The frigate listed to one side, emergency force fields struggling to contain atmosphere. A destroyer over Asia lost its main weapon array to a kinetic strike that punched clean through its hull. The crew was unharmed, but the ship was combat ineffective. 5 other ships sustained varying degrees of damage from the coordinated assault. Krellax watched the damage reports with growing anger. The humans were proving far more resourceful than intelligence had suggested. These weren't supposed to be warriors. They were supposed to be primitives awaiting subjugation. Return fire, he ordered coldly. I want every launch site identified and destroyed. Show these humans what happens when they resist the Dominion. The Krell fleet opened fire with their main batteries. Energy weapons that could vaporize asteroids lanced through Earth's atmosphere, targeting military installations with devastating precision. Beijing's command center ceased to exist in a flash of blue light. Moscow disappeared under a strike that left a crater 3 kilometers wide. The Pentagon in Washington was vaporized along with everything within 2 kilometers. But the command structure held. Regional commanders, already empowered with full authority, took over seamlessly. The decentralized system that General Webb had implemented meant that destroying one command center did nothing to slow humanity's response. More missiles launched. Fighter jets scrambled, carrying nuclear-tipped air-to-air missiles that no human pilot had ever expected to use in orbit. Naval vessels fired every weapon they had skyward in defiance, knowing their shells couldn't possibly reach the Krell, but refusing to stay silent. In the Australian outback, Jack Sullivan and his resistance fighters watched Krell landing craft descend toward their position. The craft were smaller than the capital ships, designed to deploy ground forces for mop-up operations. Remember the plan? Jack called to his people. Let them land. Let them think we're beaten. Then we show them what guerrilla warfare looks like. The landing craft touched down a kilometer from their hidden position. Ramps descended, and Krell soldiers emerged, heavily armored figures carrying weapons that hummed with energy. The Krell were bipedal, roughly humanoid but taller and more powerfully built. Their armor made them look invincible, and their weapons had no doubt conquered countless worlds. Jack waited until 50 Krell soldiers had disembarked and moved away from their landing craft. Then he triggered the trap. The ground beneath the landing craft exploded, improvised explosives planted weeks ago detonating in a carefully timed sequence. The craft lurched to one side, its anti-gravity systems damaged. Simultaneously, Jack's fighters opened fire from concealed positions. Their weapons were primitive compared to Krell technology, simple rifles and machine guns, but they aimed for joints in the armor, for sensors on helmets, for anything that looked vulnerable. 3 Krell soldiers went down in the first volley, their shields overwhelmed by sustained fire from multiple directions. The others immediately returned fire, their energy weapons cutting through trees and stone with terrifying ease. But Jack's people were already moving, falling back to new positions, using the terrain they knew intimately. The Krell advanced cautiously, their training kicking in even as they faced an unexpected ambush. Primitive weapons, the Krell squad leader commented over their comm system. But effective tactics. These humans understand warfare. Similar scenes played out across the globe. In the jungles of South America, Krell ground forces found themselves fighting an enemy that struck from nowhere and vanished into vegetation. In the mountains of Afghanistan, warriors who had fought superpowers to a standstill ambushed Krell troops with improvised explosives and stolen weapons. In the bombed-out cities of Europe, resistance fighters turned every building into a fortress. The Krell had expected to land, demonstrate overwhelming force, and watch the humans surrender. Instead, they found themselves in a grinding ground war against an enemy that refused to accept defeat. In orbit, the space battle continued. Humanity was losing ships and taking casualties at a terrible rate, but they were making the Krell work for it. Every meter of space around Earth was contested. Every Krell advance was met with suicidal resistance. Dr. Amara Okonkwo, working from a backup facility in Nigeria, watched the battle data with growing realization. The Krell weren't just powerful. They were methodical, predictable, following standard invasion protocols developed over centuries, which meant they could be trapped. General Webb, are you receiving this transmission? Webb's face appeared on her screen, haggard but determined. Go ahead, Doctor. The Krell follow patterns. Watch how they position ships after taking damage. They rotate damaged vessels to the rear, replacing them with fresh units. It's a standard military doctrine. What are you suggesting? We make them think they've damaged our most important facility. We convince them to concentrate forces on finishing it off. Then, we hit them with everything we have left in that location. Webb understood immediately. A trap. We need bait big enough to make them commit forces. I'm looking at you, General. Geneva is gone, but they think the European command is operating from somewhere. We leak false information that the backup is in Rome. Make them believe that's where our remaining coordination is happening. You're asking me to sacrifice Rome. I'm asking you to win this war. Every minute we hold out is another minute for our people to fight, to learn, to adapt. The Krell are powerful, but they're not invincible. Mars proved that. The quantum weapon proved that. We can beat them, but we need to think like humans, not like the conventional military force they expect. Webb was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. Do it. Set the trap. And God have mercy on us for what we're about to do. The false intelligence was leaked through channels the Krell were monitoring. Within an hour, a significant portion of the Krell fleet began moving toward Italy, drawn by the possibility of eliminating human command and control. They had no idea they were flying into humanity's last desperate gambit. 70 Krell warships converged on Rome, enough firepower to sterilize a continent. They approached cautiously, shields at maximum, expecting another trap, but confident in their overwhelming superiority. Below them, the Eternal City waited, its ancient monuments and modern buildings about to become a battlefield. What the Krell didn't know was that Rome had been quietly evacuated over the past 12 hours. Every civilian, every soldier, everyone who could move had been shepherded into the surrounding countryside through underground tunnels and covered routes. The city appeared occupied, heat signatures and electronic activity carefully simulated, but in reality, Rome was a beautiful, empty shell. A shell filled with enough explosives to crack the planet's crust. General Webb watched the Krell fleet tighten their formation over the city. They were positioning for a bombardment, preparing to eliminate what they believed was humanity's command center with overwhelming force. All units, stand by, he transmitted on encrypted channels. Wait for my mark. Dr. Tanaka's hands trembled over her controls. This was insane. They were about to detonate the equivalent of a volcanic eruption under a major city, gambling everything on a desperate theory about Krell shield technology. The Mars colony data had shown one critical weakness. Krell shields were directional. They could focus enormous defensive power in one direction, but they couldn't cover every angle simultaneously with maximum strength. The ships had to choose where to put their strongest protection. Right now, all 70 ships had their shields focused downward toward the anticipated human command center they were about to bombard, which meant their shields facing each other, ship to ship within the fleet formation, were at minimum power to avoid interference. Commander Krellax, we have the target locked, reported the tactical officer. Ready to fire on your command. Krellax studied the sensor data. Everything indicated a major human facility below, power signatures consistent with command and control operations. It was almost too perfect, too convenient. But time was running out. His fleet had taken unexpected casualties. Ground forces were reporting resistance far beyond what primitives should be capable of. The Dominion was undoubtedly monitoring this conquest, and every delay, every setback, reflected poorly on his command. Fire, he ordered. Reduce that city to atoms. 70 Krell warships charged their main weapons. Enough energy to vaporize Rome and everything within 50 kilometers. The air over Italy began to ionize from the buildup of exotic particles. Now, General Webb said quietly, deep beneath Rome, in the catacombs that had existed for 2,000 years in the subway tunnels and sewers and secret chambers built during countless wars, explosives detonated in a carefully choreographed sequence. This wasn't a single massive explosion. It was hundreds of simultaneous detonations, positioned and timed by the best military engineers humanity had, using data from every seismologist on the planet. The goal wasn't to destroy the city. The city didn't matter anymore. The goal was to create an artificial earthquake that would channel energy upward in a focused beam, like a volcanic eruption compressed into a weapon. The ground convulsed. Thousands of tons of rock and earth launched skyward at velocities that turned stone into projectiles. But these weren't random chunks of debris. Engineers had positioned and shaped the charges to create a cone of material that would stay relatively coherent, a solid mass of earth and concrete and steel rocketing upward. The Krell ships detected the explosion, but their sensors classified it as a massive ground detonation, primitive nuclear weapons, or chemical explosives. Their downward-facing shields were more than sufficient to handle the blast. What they didn't anticipate was the speed and mass of the debris. Kilometers of earth and stone compressed by the explosion into a semi-solid column, punched through the atmosphere at hypersonic velocities. The leading edge hit the lower stratosphere and kept going, barely slowing. The first Krell destroyer took the impact on its underbelly. The downward shields absorbed most of the kinetic energy, but the sheer mass of material overwhelmed the field generators. Debris smashed into the hull, not penetrating, but driving the ship upward into the vessel above it. The two ships collided, their weakened side-facing shields unable to prevent contact. Hulls scraped against each other, structural fields interfering destructively. Automated systems tried to compensate, pulling the ships apart, but the damage was done. Debris continued to rise, spreading out as it climbed, a fountain of earth reaching toward space. Ships tried to maneuver clear, but their tight formation worked against them. Vessels collided with each other, trying to avoid the debris field. Point defense systems fired wildly, fragmenting larger chunks, but creating shotgun blasts of smaller projectiles. A cruiser's shield generator overloaded from multiple impacts, leaving the ship temporarily vulnerable. A piece of reinforced concrete, probably from modern building, traveling at several kilometers per second, punched through the unshielded section and struck a fuel cell. The cruiser exploded, a miniature sun blooming over Italy. The explosion, in turn, damaged two nearby frigates whose shields were still recovering from debris impacts. One lost attitude control and began tumbling. The other's emergency systems activated, jumping the ship at random coordinates to escape the danger. The random jump put it directly in the path of a heavy destroyer. The collision happened too fast for either crew to react. Two ships traveling at different vectors merged in a catastrophic tangle of metal and energy. Both crews died instantly. Their vessels fused together in a twisted sculpture of destruction. In the span of 30 seconds, humanity's trap had destroyed or disabled 9 Krell warships. Commander Krellax watched his fleet dissolve into chaos and felt something he hadn't experienced in decades: fear. All ships, emergency scatter pattern. Get clear of the debris field. But the damage was done. The tight formation was broken. Ships were separated, shields weakened from multiple impacts, coordination shattered. What had been an overwhelming force was now a collection of individual vessels trying to regroup. And humanity, watching from 1,000 hidden positions, saw the opportunity and struck. Nuclear submarines launched their remaining missiles. Hidden anti-aircraft batteries emerged from camouflage and opened fire. Underground facilities that the Krell thought destroyed suddenly activated, revealing themselves as decoys while the real weapons had been elsewhere all along. Most importantly, human forces that had been hiding, conserving resources, waiting for any sign of weakness, all committed to the attack simultaneously. In geosynchronous orbit, a retrofitted satellite array that NASA had claimed was for communications suddenly revealed its true purpose. Solar panels unfolded, but instead of generating power, they focused reflected sunlight. The concentrated beam, powered by nothing but the sun itself, lanced toward a Krell frigate whose shields were still recovering. The frigate's backup shields activated just in time, but the sustained beam forced them to divert power from weapons and propulsion. The ship became a sitting target for conventional missiles that followed. In the African deserts, mass drivers that had been disguised as mining equipment began launching payloads skyward. These weren't warheads. They were simply tungsten rods, barely guided, using nothing but kinetic energy. Against full Krell shields, they would have been useless. Against weakened, distracted targets, they were devastatingly effective. A battleship over the Atlantic took 3 tungsten rods through its damaged shield section. The rods punched clean through the hull, venting atmosphere and killing dozens of Krell crew members. The ship didn't explode, but it was crippled, forced to withdraw from the battle. In low orbit, what the Krell had dismissed as space junk suddenly activated. Old satellites, supposedly decommissioned, revealed themselves as improvised mines. They were crude, just conventional explosives with simple proximity sensors, but they had been positioned along likely Krell patrol routes during the week of preparation. A squadron of Krell fighters ran into a minefield and lost half their number before they realized what was happening. The battle, which should have been a one-sided massacre, had become something else entirely, a genuine fight. On the ground, Jack Sullivan's resistance group had captured a Krell landing craft. They didn't understand most of its systems, but they understood the big red button that made it lift off and the control stick that made it go forward. "This is either the bravest or stupidest thing we've ever done," Maria said from the pilot's seat. "Probably both," Jack agreed. Now fly us into that dropship, and let's steal ourselves an alien transport. The captured landing craft, painted with human markings hastily applied, approached a larger Krell transport vessel. The transport's automated systems recognized the landing craft's Krell identification codes and opened its bay doors. Jack and his team piled out, weapons ready, and found themselves face to face with a dozen surprised Krell soldiers who had been preparing to deploy. The firefight in the confined space was brutal. Krell weapons were superior, but humans had the advantage of surprise and desperation. When the smoke cleared, 8 Krell were dead, and 4 humans were wounded, but they had captured an intact transport ship with weapons and supplies that would change the ground war. Similar stories of human ingenuity and reckless courage played out across the planet. In Singapore, hackers managed to infiltrate Krell communication networks using the captured equipment, feeding false orders that sent 3 ships on wild chases. In the Amazon, indigenous tribes used their intimate knowledge of the jungle to ambush Krell patrols, proving that advanced armor meant nothing against pits filled with stakes. But for all humanity's desperate success, the reality remained grim. 9 Krell ships destroyed was remarkable, but it left nearly 300 still operational. Casualties were mounting. Cities were rubble. The nuclear arsenal was nearly depleted. General Webb, now commanding from a mobile facility in Greenland, reviewed the situation with what remained of the global command structure. "We've hurt them," he admitted. "We've proven we can fight. But we're running out of ammunition, out of weapons, out of options. They can retreat, regroup, and come back with reinforcements. We can't." President Gonzalez, sheltering in a bunker beneath the Andes, spoke via encrypted link. "Then, we make sure they don't want to come back. We make this conquest so costly that the Krell Dominion thinks twice before attacking another species. With respect, Madam President, I don't see how. We've used everything we have." "Not everything," said Dr. Tanaka. "We still have one weapon they can't defend against." "What weapon?" "Information." Tanaka pulled up a data stream. "We've been recording every engagement, every tactic, every weakness we've found. The Krell dominate through superior technology, but they're predictable. They follow protocols. Other species could use this information to resist them. You want to broadcast our combat data to the galaxy?" Webb asked incredulously. "I want to teach the universe how to fight the Krell. Make us the example that inspires others to resist." The Dominion conquered 17 systems because nobody knew how to fight back effectively. But now we know. We know their shield weaknesses, their tactical patterns, their technology's limitations. "Premier," Chin spoke up, "a final message to the stars. Even if Earth falls, our knowledge survives. More than that," Tanaka continued, "the Krell are monitoring our communications. They'll hear the broadcast. They'll know that their secrets are being revealed to every species in the galaxy. Every primitive world they threaten from now on will have our data." Krellax was indeed monitoring human communications when the broadcast began. What he heard made his blood run cold. Detailed analysis of Krell shield technology, complete with frequency patterns and rotation cycles. Tactical assessments of fleet formations and standard response protocols. Specifications of Krell weapons with notes on their recharge rates and effective ranges. Ground force tactics, equipment vulnerabilities, communication encryption methods. Everything. The humans were broadcasting everything they had learned about fighting the Krell, transmitting it on every frequency in every direction. "Shut down that broadcast," Krellax ordered frantically. "We're trying, Commander. But they have multiple transmission sources. We destroy one, and 5 more activate. They've hidden transmitters everywhere." Krellax felt the weight of history pressing down on him. If this information spread, if other species learned that the Krell were not invincible, the Dominion would face resistance everywhere. The easy conquest would end. Every primitive world would know how to hurt them. His career was already ruined by this debacle. But if he allowed Earth's broadcast to continue, he would be responsible for weakening the entire Dominion. Cease all offensive operations, he ordered. Redirect all forces to hunting transmission sources. I want that broadcast stopped at any cost. But the broadcast continued, and something else was happening that Krellax didn't immediately understand. Across Earth, humans who had been preparing to die suddenly had a new purpose. They weren't just fighting to survive anymore. They were fighting to ensure their knowledge lived on. Every soldier who died protecting a transmission source did so knowing their death meant something. Every scientist who added data to the broadcast was writing humanity's legacy. The fight intensified, but its nature changed. This wasn't about winning anymore. It was about making sure the sacrifice counted. In orbit above Australia, a lone human fighter pilot named Rachel Kim found herself facing 3 Krell interceptors. Her aircraft was damaged, weapons nearly empty, but she could see a Krell communications relay below, one of the ships coordinating the effort to stop Earth's broadcast. "For Mars Colony," she whispered, and dove her aircraft directly into the relay ship. The crash didn't destroy the ship, but it damaged its communications array enough to create a gap in the Krell's jamming network. 3 more human transmitters activated in that gap, spreading Earth's battle data further. Similar acts of sacrifice happened worldwide. A submarine used its last power to ram a Krell ship, hunting a coastal transmitter. A resistance cell held off a Krell ground force for 3 hours, long enough for scientists to upload the final analysis of captured weapons. An elderly engineer manually maintained a transmitter while Krell soldiers stormed his position, dying so the broadcast could continue 10 more seconds. And the data kept spreading, racing out into space at light speed, carrying humanity's hard-won knowledge to anyone who might be listening. On the Krell homeworld, 300 light-years away, the Dominion Council received Krellax's report with cold fury. The conquest of Earth should have been routine. Instead, it had become a disaster that threatened the foundation of their empire. "How many ships have they lost?" the High Counselor demanded. 23 destroyed, 58 damaged enough to require extensive repairs, the intelligence officer reported, against a species that had no spacefaring military whatsoever. And the broadcast? It has reached 12 nearby star systems that we know of. The content is detailed and accurate. Any species that receives it will have a blueprint for resisting our standard tactics. The High Counselor made a decision that would change galactic history. Order Krellax to withdraw immediately. Earth is hereby classified as a protected research world. No further military action against humans is authorized. Sir, we're giving up the conquest. Conquering Earth would cost us hundreds more ships and validate their resistance. Every day we fight them, they learn more, adapt faster, and broadcast new data. Better to withdraw now and let the galaxy see them as an anomaly, not a template for resistance. But the decision came too late. Earth's broadcast had already inspired others. On a distant world called Theta Proxima, a species enslaved by the Krell for 50 years received the human broadcast. They studied the data, learned the tactics, and rose in rebellion. On another world, a species about to surrender to a Krell fleet instead chose to fight, using strategies copied from humanity's desperate stand. Across a dozen star systems, the message was clear. The Krell could be resisted. The Krell could be beaten. A primitive species from a backwater planet had proven it. Commander Krellax received the withdrawal order while hunting a transmitter in the ruins of Mumbai. He looked at the devastated city, at the humans still fighting despite having nothing left to fight with, and felt something he had never expected to feel toward a conquered species: respect. "All ships, disengage and form up for departure," he ordered. "We're leaving this system." His tactical officer looked shocked. "Sir, we haven't completed the conquest. The humans are still broadcasting, still fighting. And they always will be," Krellax said quietly. "These humans, they don't know how to surrender. We came here thinking we would eliminate another primitive species. Instead, we've awakened something that's going to haunt the Dominion for generations." As the Krell fleet withdrew, gathering at the edge of the solar system for the jump, to faster-than-light speeds. Something unexpected happened. Human forces stopped attacking. General Webb, watching the Krell retreat, spoke into his communicator. "All units, cease fire. Let them go. Sir, this is our chance to hit them while they're withdrawing." "No, we've made our point. We've shown the galaxy what we are. Now let's show them we're not mindless killers. We fight to defend our home, not to pursue retreating enemies." The Krell fleet departed Earth's solar system, leaving behind a devastated but surviving world. They had destroyed cities, killed billions, but they had not broken humanity's spirit. More surprisingly, they had not claimed victory. In the following days, as Earth began counting its dead and treating its wounded, a message arrived from the Krell Dominion. It was brief and formal, translated into every human language. "The species of Earth has demonstrated sufficient technological and strategic capacity to warrant autonomy. The Krell Dominion withdraws all territorial claims to the Sol system. Further contact will be through diplomatic channels only." In the Geneva ruins, General Webb read the message and almost laughed. Their acting like this was a test, not an attempted genocide. "Let them save face," President Gonzalez said. "What matters is they're gone and not coming back." Dr. Tanaka was more thoughtful. "This changes everything. We're not alone in the universe anymore, and we've announced ourselves in the most dramatic way possible. Every species out there now knows about humanity. Will they see us as dangerous?" Webb asked. "Some will. Others will see us as allies against the Krell. But everyone will see us as survivors, as fighters, as a species that refused to die quietly." In the months that followed, Earth slowly healed. Cities were rebuilt, this time with new technologies adapted from captured Krell equipment. The united global government that had formed during the crisis remained, humanity having learned the value of cooperation. And the messages began arriving. From species across the galaxy, civilizations that had heard Earth's broadcast, responses flooded in. Some offered alliance. Others requested the combat data. A few simply said thank you for showing that the Krell were not invincible. Sarah Chun and James Morrison were remembered as heroes, their sacrifice having saved billions. Mars Colony was rebuilt, its people honored with a memorial visible from orbit. Every child on Earth learned about the weak humanity faced extinction and refused to surrender. But perhaps the most interesting development came 3 years after the battle. A diplomatic mission arrived from a federation of species that had also resisted Krell domination. They didn't come with threats or demands. They came with a proposal. "You fought the Krell to a standstill with primitive technology and brilliant tactics," their ambassador explained to the human delegation. "Imagine what you could do with advanced technology and our combined resources. You want an alliance?" President Gonzalez asked. "We want to offer humanity a role in defending the galaxy. The Krell won't be the last threat we face. But with humans fighting alongside us, showing other species that resistance is possible, we might build something better than an empire of conquest." General Webb, now retired but attending as an advisor, smiled. "Let me make sure I understand. You're recruiting humans to be the galaxy's warriors because we're too stubborn to know when we're beaten. We're recruiting humans because you prove that courage and ingenuity can overcome superior technology. Because when faced with extinction, you chose to fight. And because you didn't just fight for yourselves, you fought to make sure others could resist too." The alliance was formalized within a year. Human soldiers began training with advanced technology, bringing their unique perspective to joint military operations. Human engineers reverse-engineered Krell technology and improved on it. Human diplomats, having faced the ultimate threat, helped negotiate peaceful resolutions to conflicts that might have become wars. Earth had been introduced to the galaxy in fire and blood, but from that crucible emerged something unprecedented, a species that combined primitive ferocity with modern intelligence, that could match any foe's technology, but never forgot the value of courage and sacrifice. The Krell had come to Earth expecting an easy conquest. Instead, they had created their greatest enemy and the galaxy's newest hope. And somewhere in the ruins of Mars Colony, on a monument built to honor the 2,000 who died in humanity's first battle, an inscription captured the spirit of what had happened. They came expecting us to submit. We taught them what it means to be human. We taught them that some species don't conquer or surrender. Some species survive, adapt, and overcome. We taught them to fear, not our weapons, but our refusal to accept defeat. This is humanity's legacy to the stars. The galaxy would never be the same. The Krell Dominion, for the first time in centuries, faced real opposition. Other species found courage in humanity's example. And Earth, having survived its trial by fire, stepped onto the galactic stage not as victims or conquerors, but as the species that had looked death in the face and refused to blink. The shocking surprise wasn't that humanity survived. The shocking surprise was that humanity had taught the galaxy something the Krell had made them forget, that freedom is worth any cost, and that no species, no matter how advanced, could defeat determination backed by hope. Humanity had won not through superior weapons or technology, but through the one thing that could never be conquered, the stubborn, irrepressible, absolutely human refusal to give up. The quantum disruptor fired. It was the absolute refusal to accept defeat, no matter how inevitable it seemed. They just needed to be the most stubborn species in the galaxy. And when it came to stubborn survival against impossible odds, humanity had been practicing for millions of years.